Hello, today I'm with Alan Farr, Professor Emeritus from Iwate University. I've known Alan over 10 years. Today, he's going to talk to us about the movie Tokyo Story. At Iwate University, Alan Farr was famous for his film studies classes, as well as his English language classes. Alan, thank you for being with us today.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm honored to be invited to speak. This is the first time I've spoken online in a class, but this is the latest fashion now with the COVID. So tonight I'd like to talk about Ozu Yasujiro's most famous film, Tokyo Monogatari. Ozu is one of the most famous Japanese directors outside of Japan. And his movie Tokyo Monogatari is perhaps the most famous of all. It's a classic film. For many of you, it will be the first time you have seen this film. And I want you all to ask yourself the first question: why is this film so famous? Why is this film considered to be one of the greatest films ever made? The answer will not be so easy, and I think it will take time for you to be able to answer this question. What I mean by time, you may have to watch this film several times. Each time you watch it, you will find a new meaning in the film. And gradually, you will come to have a deep understanding of the film and what the director, Ozu Yasujiro, wants to communicate. We could say that the film Tokyo Monogatari is a simple story. The title itself means story, a Tokyo story. And I will not talk about the story because it is very simple and everybody can easily understand. But the surface of the film, although simple, has a depth which is not simple. And this is why, to fully understand the film, you must watch the film several times over the course of several years. We could say that Ozu is a poet of film. And this film, the Tokyo Monogatari, is a kind of poetry. And as we know, poetry is not always easy to understand. And you need to read a poem over and over before you can get the meaning. So today's talk is mainly how to read a film and how to read this particular film. First of all, the story itself is, like I said, very simple. It's a story of a family, and the story opens in Onomichi and ends in Onomichi. So there is a circular movement to the story. This circular movement is symbolic. And to understand Tokyo Monogatari, you have to be able to understand the film in symbolic terms. What does this mean, the circle? Well, we can look at life as a circle, where we are born and we grow, we age and we die. This is the circle of life, a circle as understood in Buddhism. There is in this story a philosophical base which is the most difficult of all for foreigners to understand. I'd like to make clear that Ozu Yasujiro, although he is considered to be a very Japanese director, is also a director who can be understood by people who are not Japanese, because there are two dimensions to Ozu Yasujiro. Number one is the Japanese cultural aspect of the film. In order to understand this, you must know about Japan. The story takes place, the film was made in 1953, and the story takes place after the Second World War. In 1954, the Japanese economy began to take off, and for the next 16 years, until 1970, this was a period of extraordinary economic growth, what the Japanese call the Kodo Keizai Seichoki, the period of fast economic growth. So this is a period when Japan is changing. These changes are hinted at by Yasujiro. For example, when we read a film, we need to look at the contrasts. In Tokyo Monogatari, the contrast is between Onomichi, a small traditional town in southern Japan, and Tokyo, a huge metropolis. We see an image of a factory with chimneys. We see this image in the film, and this has a symbolic meaning. It shows the ugliness of the urban environment in contrast to the beauty and nature of Onomichi. The Shujinko, the protagonist of the story, the Hirayama family, the father and mother go to Tokyo to see their children. And here we have a contrast between the older generation and the younger generation. Through the images, we are able to understand the story as well as through the conversation. We can follow the conversation quite easily. It's very simple. But the deeper meaning of the conversation requires more thought. One of the favorite expressions of the father, Hirayama Shukichi, is "ii tenki desu ne." The weather's nice today. But this phrase comes whenever there is some important change in his life or in the story. There is a drama, we can call it a melodrama in the story. And the melodrama is pointing to a deeper level. This deeper level we can only comprehend, understand, if we're able to see the film in symbolic terms and understand the philosophy. The philosophy is connected to Buddhism. And I have written here some key kanji. At the bottom we have the word mujo. And mujo is a Buddhist term meaning the changeability of life, the uncertainty of life. Nothing remains the same. Everything is changing. We all experience this as we journey through life and we fulfill the circle of life. This philosophical term, mujo, we can see throughout the film. Time is shown. We can hear the sound of clocks. We can see the clocks. We can understand that time is passing for everybody. The second term here is mono no aware. Mono no aware is a very famous term in Japanese culture. Mono means thing, as you know. Aware means sadness or sorrow. The Japanese word awareru means to kanashimu, to feel sadness and sorrow. For example, if someone is sick or dies, or some terrible event occurs. Originally, the word aware was pronounced in Old Japanese ahare, and the meaning was a little bit different. It was the meaning of aha, when we are surprised by something, when we find something we didn't expect. And this aha moment we can see in the film in many different places, where the characters in the film make discoveries about each other and about life. The mono no aware is a philosophical term to express the feeling of sadness we feel as time changes when we see people aging, or we see something which reminds us of the past. It can be an old object from our youth. Mono no aware is a famous cultural term in Japanese, which all foreign students should study. And this will help us to understand the film. To understand a film, we have to read a film. And I've written here a kanji, kansho. Kan means to look, and sho is to become illuminated, for a light to turn on. And the idea is when we look at something and we think, something in our brain, in our mind, becomes illuminated. Something like, if we're lucky, satori. We become, suddenly we understand something. A kansho means to meditate. And this is how we have to read the film. We must meditate on the film. In other words, we must look at the film, and then we must think, and we will find new meanings. Each time we watch the film and we meditate, we will see a new meaning. The next word is shokai. Shokai means to inquire, and tante means to look into, both similar meaning. Tante is the word for detective, to look for clues, to look for hints. Shokai is to inquire, and the kai is the meeting, and this is what we need to do after we have watched the film, is to talk with our friends, to talk with other people who have seen the film and exchange ideas. You can learn a lot from each other. So by meditating on what you are watching, what you have seen, by looking for the clues, and then discussing together the questions you have, you'll be able to find a deeper meaning to the story and to the film. One important thing about the film is the structure of the film. Ozu Yasujiro often shows us a scene of an empty room or a corridor. There is nobody there. Suddenly somebody appears, or somebody leaves the space. The Japanese word ma, meaning space, is bookends some of the scenes. We see people together, conversing, communicating, but before that scene and after the scene, we often see an empty scene. Just like onomichi is the bookend of the film. The beginning of the film and the end of the film, we see onomichi. In the same way, many scenes in the film have a space which bookends them. This space can also be seen as mu here, mu meaning nothing, emptiness. This is also a Buddhist term. The emptiness, the mystery of life. A few years ago, I visited the grave of Ozu Yasujiro in Kamakura. And on his grave is very simple. There is a stone with this one kanji, mu, nothing, emptiness. This is a Buddhist term which I think fits very well with our latest understanding of modern physics, of particle physics, the mystery of the universe. This is a very deep subject, and I am not an expert on mu, but this is something that I think some of you will become interested in pursuing, in studying. We have to understand the time of the story. The story is after the war, and every Japanese family has been touched by loss and death. In this story, the mother and father lost one of their sons, Shoji. He died in the war, and his widow, Noriko-san, is contrasted with their children. And again, as I said, by looking at the way a director contrasts people and things is how we can get meaning out of the film. And if we compare Noriko-san and the two children, especially Shige-san and Koichi-san, who live in Tokyo, we can understand the problem for parents and for children. Some people may think that the children are ungrateful. In Japan, in Japanese culture, oyakoko is an important term. The duty we feel to our parents, the gratitude we feel to our parents, the natural gratitude. In this film, the oyakoko is perhaps lacking, but I think Ozu Yasujiro shows some understanding for the pressure of the children. They have moved from the small town Onomichi to the big city of Tokyo, and life is very difficult for the children, and they're struggling to live their lives, to raise their standard of living like millions of Japanese people. So I think Ozu shows some sympathy for them. So we must not be too quick to judge them to